Ross Greenwood, thank you for joining me. Why are power prices going up yet again?
It's because of the unreliability of the Australian energy grid on the East Coast. Effectively, it's the reality that the coal-fired power stations are less reliable. They do need work. They're eventually going to be phased out. I found it ironic today that the Energy Minister, Chris Bowen, was talking about the unreliability of these coal-fired power stations. He's a man who wants to get rid of them. But without them, the price of electricity would have been many times higher. Because the reality is that, at the moment, the grid cannot solely work on renewables. There is not enough gas in the system to even the system out. And so as a result, when you get these periods of either extreme temperature, you're going to get massive spikes in the price, and ultimately consumers pay for this. So this is about energy policy, pure and simple, that needs to land at the feet of the federal government.
Yeah, I thought he was a bit dishonest because the energy regulator also went on and blamed wind and solar for not producing the goods either, and he didn't mention that, which is interesting. The Albanese government did promise to cut power prices. They've instead, as everyone knows, have gone way up. Why do you think the plans have gone so wrong?
The reason is because they've come in at it with a philosophical view and not a scientific view. And so the fact of the matter is that they have believed, because they think it is electorally palatable to people, that the notion of wind and of solar is going to get people across the line. And look, in an ideal world, if the science were there, that may be true. But the reality is that the world is not there yet. The battery technology is not sufficiently there. We haven't been able to build out the hydro projects, the pumped hydro projects, to be able to ensure the stability of the grid. And also the fact is that you've got coal-fired power stations that are ageing, and you've got really a demonisation against even new gas projects to try and create more of the gas-fired electricity power generators. So all of this is almost a perfect storm by which Australia sees itself short of electricity, and because it is a market, the fact of the matter is when anything's in short supply, the price goes up. And it's not a matter of trying to manage that market. You can't do that. A market is a market. And so the prices go to where the demand and the supply is. Now, look, to be fair, there are some days when the wind is blowing, the sun is shining, and there's lots of electricity, and electricity prices are negative. They're paying you to take the electricity away. But that's the extreme. At the other end of the extreme is when it goes, many hundreds of times above what is a long-term average. And ultimately, the average of all of this is what Australian consumers and businesses are paying.
I want to go to the new tariffs that Donald Trump has imposed on our steel and aluminium. Caused a huge fuss, how outrageous it is, and I thought it was a bit of a dog act to do to an ally. But Donald Trump's Commerce Secretary has defended them by accusing Australia of dumping our aluminium. Have a listen. This is a real blast.
We're not going to stand for China dumping, Japan dumping. Australia does a lot of aluminum at below cost. I mean, this has got to end, and the president is on it, and he's protecting America.
Now, what's interesting, Ross, and I think, this is a warning to our politicians to face up to how flabby our industry has become and how pampered and cosseted, is that is absolutely right. Our governments do subsidise our aluminium smelters, subsidise it for the high energy prices, among other things. And Clive Palmer was right onto it today when he was talking about his new political party, Trumpet of Patriots, at the National Press Club. Listen to this.
Trump is probably concerned that other aluminium smelters in the United States who don't have a subsidy from the Australian government or from the New South Wales government have to compete with them. And he probably thinks that's not fair. And I think it's not fair either. I think we want industries that really create real wealth. We don't want industries that are subsidies, because who's going to pay for the subsidy? It's the taxpayer.
Clive Palmer is absolutely right, isn't he?
Well, he is. And if you think about the Portland aluminium smelter that Alcoa put into Victoria many years ago, which was for export purposes, the reason that got up as a viable opportunity was because of cheap electricity provided largely by the government and a long-term government guarantee. But it's always important with these matters, when there's emotions flaring, to go to some facts. Here are some facts for you. Last year, Australia exported 223,000 tonnes of steel to America. Now, the important aspect of this is to recognise that that represented about 0.8% of the amount of steel that the United States imported. And when it comes to aluminium, 83,000 tonnes of aluminium, and broadly that was about something of the order of 1.5% of the amount of aluminium that America imported. And it is true to say that at one point they did rise. We did start to export a bit more, but really it is a dead set drop in the bucket. So a lot of people have got themselves terribly emotional over what appears to be a slight from Donald Trump to Australia when he has done it to every single country in the world, and not just singled us out to industries that actually don't send a lot of product there. In fact, the steel that goes from Australia to America goes from Wollongong, Port Kembla, BlueScope Steel to America to BlueScope's plant in Ohio, where it's then turned basically into roofing, ColourBond. And so from that point of view, let's be honest, this really is a lot of politicians here getting, during an election campaign, pretty hot under the collar over something that genuinely is not a big issue at all.